Hi, this is Sally Burgess with Studio Gaia. Welcome to the Mother Pod. Hey everyone, Sally with Studio Gaia. Welcome to episode number 4 of the Mother Pod. I'm joined today by Renee Davidson, a local psychotherapist and yoga teacher. And Renee is going to be talking to us about Yoga Nidra, also known as yogic sleep. And I have to say, before we get started, you are truly one of my favorite people. I remember the first time you came to the studio and we met, and it just felt like we were so compatible. And when you talked about wanting to bring Yoga Nidra to the studio, it clicked right away. I just knew that would be something that would be very valuable. So let's just get right into it. Tell us why you feel so strongly that the practice of Nidra is an important thing to add to the modern world. Why do we need one more practice?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel like Nidra is so important right now because most of us may be aware of it and maybe not, live in a pretty chronic state of fight or flight. Now that might be mild, it might be moderate. It's not that most of us are walking around with PTSD, that's not what I'm saying. But what's happened to our nervous system over the years is that we are constantly fielding stimuli from the outside world without rest. We think that sleep is enough to kind of reset our systems, and science is showing us that absolutely it's not. So if we take an example, like what's happened since we were more like cavemen and women, to what's happened now in the modern world, when there was a threat, when life was simpler, when we didn't have so much coming in from the outside world into our sense doors, which includes our sight, our hearing, our touch, our taste, our thinking, our hearing, all of that, those are considered sense doors. So when we were a little more primitive in our lifestyle, the threats would be like a saber-toothed tiger lurking around the camp. And when people when the sympathetic nervous system needed to kick on to protect against that real threat, it did. And then when the threat was gone, everybody could take a deep sigh of relief, and the threat was over, and everyone went on about their daily life that was much more peaceful. That doesn't happen anymore. We have so many threats that continue to bombard our system all the time.
So we don't have the real threats, but the perceived threats they proliferate, right? It's like every day we're being hit with so many different things.
Absolutely. So that's a good word, the perceived threats that we experience. So if you think about perceived threats that happen in this modern world, we have cars that hurtle us through the universe at 90 miles an hour sometimes. We have planes. These are not experiences that our cells, our systems are used to having. I mean, evolution takes hundreds of thousands of years, and here we've made huge advances in 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, and that's getting faster and faster and faster. Perceived threats, in my opinion, can include things like having Facebook alarms go off every 2 seconds, and emails, and all social media outlets, all of the technology that we have to keep up with, all of the billboards that are constantly flashing and advertising to us. If you think about the load that your sense doors have to take on for that, it's immense. We never get a chance to rest. And so as the system takes in all of that stimuli, we just get more and more and more and more hyper-aroused, more and more reactive to our environment. And it's a problem.
And like you said, we think that when we lay down at night, we get a few hours rest. I think most people are chronically fatigued.
Yes.
But even if we're getting 7-8 hours, that's not sufficient. That's not doing it.
Not sufficient.
Because we have so much sensory stimuli that is just constantly coming in, bodies and our minds. And that puts us in like a chronic state of fight or flight.
Yes. So the problem is that when the fight or flight, so if there is a real threat, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, which is healthy. We need that to happen so that we can actually survive that threat. When it's perceived threats that are chronic, the sympathetic nervous system is constantly aroused because the perceived threat is constant. It doesn't go away. It's chronic. It It is chronic in our modern life. So the problem with that is then when the sympathetic nervous system is kicked on, we know that cortisol and other stress hormones increase in our bodies. We know that inflammation increases, and then digestion and the immune response decrease because those are not needed. What is needed is survival. So anything that's not necessary, like digesting food, you're not going to have a meal when there's a saber-toothed tiger lurking around. That gets turned off. If we are in a chronic state of fight or flight, that chronic state of the sympathetic nervous system being activated, digestion and the immune response isn't working properly, really scary. Because we know how important these are for foundational for health.
We talk in yoga all the time about the importance of rest and digest.
Yes.
Rest and digest.
Yes.
So it's a natural response, but it's problematic.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's why we're seeing so much disease, so much cancer, obesity, heart disease, all of those issues that are plaguing our society these days?
You know, I really do. It's taken me several years of really teaching this and seeing how it's affected my students has led me to believe that yes, there's so much going on in our systems that we can't process quickly enough. That absolutely, I think the chronic stress that we're under is limiting our body's ability to fight common things that we normally would be able to fight. Cancer cells that are naturally in our body, that our bodies have learned to take care of for thousands of years. And now, in the modern life where we have more technology, more medicine, all of the more that we have, and cancer is increasing. So I feel like, yes, it's because of the chronic stress that we're under, and people have forgotten how to prepare and eat real whole foods.
I absolutely agree with
I know you do.
So Nidra can help.
I believe that Nidra can help.
Tell us more.
I believe that what Nidra does is takes us out of that chronic fight or flight response. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system so that we actually can get into that rest and digest mode. But the neat thing about Nidra is that it just doesn't do it for an hour. I mean, how many of us have done a yoga class, or this happens to me all the time when I'm teaching or taking yoga, or have gotten a massage, and I feel amazing for an hour and a half. And then I walk outside and suddenly it's like my system is wired again for stress. Immediately it happens. Nidra is a little bit different because what we're doing in Nidra is we're working on the levels of mind, body, and spirit. And when I say mind, I mean the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. And what that's doing is bringing both parts of the mind into, and I think I'm getting ahead of myself here when saying this, but it feels appropriate now, bringing both states of those mind together so that the sympathetic nervous system is the one that holds our traumas, the one that holds our stresses. It is our body's animalistic response to those threats, real or perceived. In Nidra, we're bringing that part of the mind in balance with the conscious mind. And so in Nidra, people have said experiences come up where it's like, oh, there was this experience of fear. And it's your subconscious mind saying, I'm relaxed. The whole body is relaxed. It's safe to let that come out now. And in Nidra, we're so still that there's no knee-jerk reaction to respond to that fear. It's just like all you can do is sit there and say, oh, fear, and it's not a threat anymore. It's something that your subconscious mind is then processing via your conscious mind, because both are level in Nidra. So I feel like this can help us get out of that chronic fight or flight state, and it's lasting. We're rewiring the neurobiology so that we can reclaim calmness, clarity, that peacefulness, that harmony that is our birthright to experience in this world. We can reclaim that as our natural state instead of chronic fight or flight.
My recollection of being in Nidra classes is there are two things to be aware of.
Yes.
Don't move and don't fall asleep.
Yes.
And that has to do with pratyahara, correct? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so Yoga Nidra is one of the, pratyahara, which is one of the 8 limbs of yoga that we practice, really means sense withdrawal. And so in Yoga Nidra, we literally are doing that. The only senses that are operating are the senses of feeling, because you will be feeling the experience in the sense of hearing. You're listening to the voice, and the instructions are precisely that. Don't move, because that involves sensory information. You have to move your body, then you're going to start being aware of sensations that we don't need you to be aware of. It's about being as still as possible and only listening and only feeling the inner sensations that happen, and that's pratyahara. All of the senses are drawn inward. All of that vital energy that normally goes out so that we can engage with the world that we live in, we're actively trying to draw that energy inward so that there's nothing, no stimuli that needs to be fielded except for the stimuli of what's happening in yourself. And it's so profound and it's so healing.
One of the experiences I had with Nidra, and I just found it so fascinating, you were talking, and I had a sense of where you were, and then you invited us to come back, open our eyes, and when I opened my eyes, I was in a completely different position than I thought I was. It was almost like I had lifted and shifted.
Yes.
It was so amazing. It's just, there's something about Nidra, you really have to try it.
Yes.
To really appreciate the depth.
I agree with you. I mean, it is definitely something to experience. We can talk about how relaxing it is and how great it feels and how what you feel after you get done practicing is nothing you've ever experienced before. But in order to really know what that means, you just have to lay down and do it. And it is profoundly healing on so many different levels.
So we've talked on the physical and mental health benefits, and we've talked about some of the behavioral benefits. Tell us more about how Nidra is used. I think you've mentioned PTSD.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the ways I'm most familiar in it being used, especially in the West, where we are like, oh, we have to document everything scientifically, which is great. They have done so much documentation with the use of Yoga Nidra and PTSD. So we're talking combat veterans, people who have been on the front lines, some of the most traumatized veterans that we have coming home. And what they find is, well, first let me talk a little bit about the symptoms of PTSD. This is something that I treat a lot of in my practice. It's mostly not as much war veterans, but I'll see a lot of rape victims and people who've experienced other things in their life that have caused PTSD. So the main symptoms are feeling hyperarousal, which is that feeling that I'm constantly on edge, looking around me, where's the next threat coming from, which I think all of us experience on a day-to-day basis, but in PTSD, it is highly pronounced and deep. Every corner, every trigger that could come through the sense doors can be something that can throw a person into that feeling of I'm not safe. And it depends on what each person's triggers are. Another cluster of the symptomology of PTSD would be I was going to say hypersensitivity. That's the hyperarousal. It's the re-experiencing symptoms. The symptoms that, like the flashbacks, the nightmares that come, the insomnia that comes with that. Another cluster is depression and anxiety. And they just added that, the powers that be just added that as a whole different cluster of symptoms because that is so common in PTSD. And then the last type of cluster of symptoms is avoidance. So actually avoiding experiences, places, people, anything at all that reminds you of what happened to you. So what they find in using Yoga Nidra is that it allows people to actually feel what it feels like to be safe in their bodies again. So you get so still, you get so calm, and the simple act of drawing the senses inward is such a relief for people who are constantly actively scanning their environment for safety, right? The act of having that energy freed up to go within themselves and to just feel that safety that comes and that ability to kind of feel their own vital energy, so healing. Now, it doesn't cure the PTSD, but it helps them to feel safe and grounded in their bodies so that their bodies can do what their bodies know how to do best, which is heal whatever needs healing. And that's one of the beautiful applications of Yoga Nidra. I do private sessions in my office a lot with people because so many people come through the door and they just don't know how to get grounded and feel safe in their bodies anymore. So
we offer Yoga Nidra at Studio Gaia, which is great. It's wonderful to be able to have people come, and we've got a lovely space for that. But you don't have to leave your house to have the experience of Yoga Nidra. And I'm so very excited to tell you about Renee's brand new CD that we'll be having here at the studio, that you can purchase at the studio, at your office, iTunes. Tell us more.
At my office here in Edwardsville, here at Studio Gaia, I will have, it's on Amazon, not yet. It'll be up on Amazon in a couple of weeks. They tend to take a little bit longer to get, but they have it in stock. They just haven't posted it on their site yet. So Amazon's, iTunes, CD Baby, if anyone knows what that is. And then anywhere that you can stream music, you can find it and stream it that way too. So you can do it at home. I have purposely created the CD to be as close to a classroom experience if you were taking it from me. But it's different when you're sharing space with other people and you have a teacher in the room to anchor the space. But in the CD, I've been very intentional about making it feel as deep as I can so that it would feel like a classroom experience.
It seems that if someone is really in the throes of PTSD or a situation that is really affecting them deeply, being here at the studio and having you available immediately afterwards can be hugely helpful. Do you have any concerns about something coming up when a person is with your CD by themselves? Something comes up and handling that?
I don't have concerns as long as the person knows that, first of all, I'd say know that it's a deep practice, and if something has come up, it is the perfect time for that to come up, that your body felt safe, your mind felt safe to finally experience that repressed memory or emotion or even physical pains that come in the body. Sometimes we can have such a release that the emotion that's stuck with that pain will come out. So it's the perfect time for that. And then know that you can reach out either to a professional or to people in your life, because it's nothing that we all don't experience at some point or another. Beautiful. So it's really natural, and I would honor that and love it and be grateful for that, and then reach out.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What else would you like us to know?
One of the reasons I feel so strongly about this practice is that I really feel like it turned my life around, and this is very dramatic, but essentially saved my life. I had a period of time where I didn't realize what I was dealing with, but I was dealing with some really deep, long repressed trauma that had happened to me and didn't have memory of that trauma. And I stopped sleeping for about 3 months. And my body hurt everywhere, and doctors had no idea what was going on. There was a lot of psychosomatic symptomology that nobody could figure out, and the lack of sleep was about breaking me. And I started going to Yoga Nidra classes and listening to CDs, and that is what pulled me through. And I remember it being a turning point for me, because I actually felt, if I can get this kind of relief from a practice that takes me an hour or less to do, I think I can beat this. Whatever it is, and I didn't know what I was dealing with at the time, but I think that I can do this. It provided that much relief. So I want to share that. Like, it is deeply healing and profound, even when you're in deep, deep states of peril and challenge and crisis. And so imagine that if you're not. Imagine if you're in this mild to moderate state of, chronic stress, and you decide, I'm going to take control over my life. I'm going to learn how to relax again. I'm going to learn how to live in a state of grace and balance and harmony and not chronic stress, just by practicing this 2 or 3 times a week, you're preventing adrenal fatigue. You're preventing eventual, all these different chronic health problems that we all have, because you decide that I don't have to live in this state. So it can be helpful for someone who experienced, like I did, I was in crisis. It can be helpful for people who say, I think I kind of want to avoid a health crisis in my life.
Right?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. It's so interesting, and I have taken Yoga Nidra classes. It is absolutely wonderful. We'd love to have you join us here, or we'd love for you to find Renee's CD online, or how it's available in many different ways.
In many different ways. Physical copies, you can stream it, you can download it from iTunes. Yes.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
That's huge.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
It's been a big project, and I am really excited about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.